4, 3, 2, 1. Hello. It must be Thursday at lunchtime because we are live on LinkedIn, Facebook, even YouTube with Jedi Lunch Break Live, Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Strategies in 15 minutes or less. I have to tell you, today sits a little bit different for me. So we are absolutely going to get to our topic and spend a little time there, really digging into giving some suggestions for people who may be looking for employment places that have good programs that support inclusion and equity. But before we get there, I cannot, because this is live, so I cannot not say something. There's a double negative. Let me put it like this. I must, it is a moral imperative that I mention and say something about the Supreme Court decision around affirmative action that was just released today. Well, it's not good. It's not good at all. In fact, in a 6-3 decision, the Supreme Court has decided that affirmative action based on race in our admissions process in higher education does not meet and violates, I should say, the Equal Protection Clause. So what does this mean? Well, we'll do more deep digging, and I will definitely be coming back to you probably in next week's session to talk more about what this really means for our education system, for our higher education system, and frankly, what it means for affirmative action, period, and affirmative action programs. Really, affirmative action was set up and designed just so that we're absolutely clear on what has happened. Affirmative action programs were set up and designed as an equity program to allow a legal way to acknowledge a community of people who have previously been disenfranchised by the system, by systemic oppression within the system, within the institution, which could be government institution, obviously collegiate institutions. And affirmative action is a way to both acknowledge that disparity as well as remedy it and provide additional support for people, in this case students, who do not show up on an equal playing field to the platform. This essentially, in the court's eyes, institutes a colorblind system. But I don't know who in the world is colorblind and doesn't see race. That is really just, frankly, a denial, an important denial of many people's identities. Who we are and how we identify, and particularly for people of color, race is a big part of that. And basically, the Supreme Court today gave permission for higher institutions not to see that. It's a heavy day. But we can hold things, we can hold more than one thing at one time. And so I want to be true to what I assured you I would talk about. And I will share this in this vein. And we're going to actually have, because I get this question a lot. And the question of the day that I get, and this will be a 3-part series. So today is just part 1. How do I know if my company or organization is taking diversity, equity, inclusion, or workplace culture seriously? This is part 1. And I want to start with this question is the before employment point of view. So there are a lot of things that you can look at before you are ever employed with an organization or an institution. And in fact, it's great to consider these things when you're going through the recruitment process, during both when you're just deciding whether or not to apply, or when you're being interviewed, or even if you're considering a job offer. So first and foremost, let's see, what does the organization or institution say about itself? Check the website and other public facing documents for a DEI statement. If there is a statement, and this is a statement beyond just your typical equal employment opportunity statement that says that they are committed to non-discriminatory practices, what you're really looking for is a statement that speaks to specific commitments or strategies that the institution is doing to address equity and or acknowledge that they have participated in systemic oppression and are seeking to remedy it. That is crucial. Those are the kinds of words that you need to be looking for in a statement. Again, beyond your typical non-discriminatory policies, which at this point, let's face it, have become pretty boilerplate for most companies and organizations. You're looking for a commitment that institution, company, or organization has made to diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies. And again, remember from a previous live, I primarily use justice, equity, diversity, inclusion, but you could see this as idea, inclusion, diversity, equity, accessibility. You may even see DEIB. The B stands for belonging. There are many different iterations of this, but what you're really looking for is the substance, not just the title. And you want to be looking for specific commitments and or strategies that really address and say what we're going to do to address equity, how we're going to create belonging, or a quick, or at least at a minimum, an acknowledgement that they need to be doing something better and that there has been systemic oppression as part of its history. So number two, the other thing you want to look at is who manages the diversity, equity, inclusion work. Where does that work lie? Is it a person's full-time job? And in small and in large organizations, it absolutely should be. In smaller institutions, particularly if they have staff of less than 75, you may find that it is not a full-time job, but a part of a person's job, which is completely appropriate in small organizations. But if you are looking at a large institution, and particularly a really large institution that has more than 150 employees and a $20 million plus budget, then what you really want to be looking for is whether or not there is a separate vertical that reports directly to leadership. Leadership in this case usually being the CEO or president. And some nonprofits, you may see the leadership bifurcated between a president and executive director or management director. But in any case, whatever the leadership looks like in that institution, the person who is managing diversity, equity, inclusion should be reporting directly to them. And why is that important? Because managing a full program around diversity, equity, inclusion is not just an HR function. Let me say that again. Diversity, equity, inclusion is not just an HR function. It is, in fact, a function that not only deals with people, but systems and organizational development. And so if that person who is managing the DEI functions in that organization do not have direct access to leadership, then they're probably only dealing with a part of the diversity and workplace culture elements. A red flag for me is when I look at an organizational chart and the person who is managing DEI reports to the human resource department or the talent department. And the reason is because what that says to me is that this organization or institution is only looking at equity and inclusion policies through the lens of its people. What it's not doing is considering diversity, equity, inclusion policies as it relates to the norms of the institution, the organizational design of the institution, and the ways in which that institution and its systems impact its talent. And then number three, I always recommend that people look, at how resources are being spent. I remember years ago, even when I was a a young girl going to church. My pastor at the time, now Congressman Cleaver, used to say, if you want to know what people care about, look at what's in their checkbook. How are they spending their money? Well, that advice is good for when you think about institutions and whether or not they care or really are invested in diversity, equity, inclusion. Well, Holly, you're saying, how am I supposed to know how they're spending their money? They're not going to just open their budget to me. No, maybe not, but let's look at some key telltale signs. First thing, think about whether or not there's an investment in having employee resource groups. Employee resource groups are an excellent way to not only build camaraderie around people who share your identity, but also to ensure that you are assisting and supporting company efforts to create inclusive spaces. Another place to think about where people are spending their money is what are they doing as it relates to training? Do they have ongoing training around diversity, equity, inclusion beyond just your standard DEI 101, as I like to refer to it? Do they have a professional development program or mentoring program? Do they have, are there board policies or board statements around what the company is doing or what the organization is doing? You want to be looking at this. How is it showing up in the way that it presents internally, but also how is it showing up in the way that it presents externally? Who are its customers? Who are its partners? Who are some of the people? Who are its key stakeholders? And if you look around and you see that they're primarily engaging in spaces, places, and stakeholders who don't represent a diversity, this probably is an indication of how important they think it is or not. And these are some key indicators that you can use when you are thinking about whether or not you want to go and work for an organization or institution. And I'm not saying that you don't work for them if they don't meet all these buckets, but at least when you choose, if you choose to work for them, you're going to be fully informed about their position around these important diversity, equity, and inclusion issues. I have 2 more segments that I'm going to do on just this issue alone about how you can tell whether your company is taking it seriously. The next 2 segments on this are going to be more from the I already work here perspective, and I want to know how I can know or things that I can be advocating for from an inside perspective, but also know that there will be a little more to come on this tragic decision from the Supreme Court today on affirmative action. Frankly, I'm going to leave it there today. I appreciate you all checking in with me. We have so much more to come, so much more to talk about. This decision tells me one thing, that these Jedi lunch break lives are very much needed because the world is really challenging equity in our space. If you're looking for specific information and have a specific question, please feel free to email us here at jedi@holidayadvisors.com. Until then, I encourage you to like, share, subscribe, and follow me on all my social media channels. I'll be back next week, Thursday at noon for your lunch break live. Justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion strategies in 15 minutes or less. Happy Thursday. Did you enjoy this segment of Jedi Lunch Break Live? I'll be back next Thursday. Come on back and bring a friend.